So I want to introduce Beth. Beth is founder and principal of Smart Mouth Communications, a communication consultancy and coaching training business. Beth is the creator of Smart Mouth On Demand, an online presentation training platform, and the Smart Mouth Public Speaking Toolkit, a 5-star rated mobile iOS app. She is the author of the book Jock Talk, 5 Communication Principles for Leaders as Exemplified by Legends of the Sports World.
That's a long one.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
So this first session this morning is executive communication tips for women. And this addresses certain very actionable tips and strategies for you on a more personal level, whether it's for you yourself or for people you work with, people you'd like to mentor, women in the workplace that you'd like to help. This session this morning, for the next hour or so, I'm going to ask you to look for ideas, thoughts, insights, and actual tips that you might use. Things that create aha moments for you, things that remind you of habits you want to stop or things you want to start doing differently. I'd really like you to have really actionable takeaways, things you might even use this afternoon or tomorrow morning when you go back to work. I want to start with a couple of discussion points. When you think about first impressions, and this is non-gender related, so this isn't necessarily just women, but when you think about first impressions, what do you think the contribution of body language, tone of voice, and words are? What would you say contributes the most? Does anyone want to take a guess? Interesting. And did you all hear Shannon's talk before? She used that she had a different statistic than I do, but she talked about that, how important body language is. So this is the answer from the research that I've done. Body language contributes about 55% of someone's first impression of you. Tone of voice about 38%, and then your words 7%. So the one issue I take with these statistics and these data is that when you think about it, if you aren't solid in your words, it's probably going to affect your tone of voice and affect your body language. So these, I think, are very interrelated. And even though words get a really small rating, I think how you feel about your words actually matters, because I think there is a direct correlation. If you're confident in the words and in your material, your body language is going to be stronger, your tone of voice is going to be stronger. And so there's an interrelationship there. I wouldn't discount words as a 7% contributor only. So that's an insight to hold on to. Second discussion point. These are some true-false statements. Men are inherently more assertive than women. Is that true or false?
False. They're allowed to be more aggressive.
So there's a mixture of true and false in this room. It's actually false. And Jenny's right. There is a certain socialization process that happens from the time boys and girls are very young, all the way through school, and then into the workplace. This socialization process allows them to feel empowered to be more assertive. Biologically, studies show that men and women, boy and girl babies from the get-go, have the same assertiveness is measured in terms of aggression. We're equal. And in fact, if there's any difference at all, it's that women are slightly more aggressive because we have this innate thing that makes us want to protect our families. So we're actually slightly more aggressive. But over time and the socialization process, we are the message is sent to us to be hostesses. And by that I mean make everybody feel comfortable, accommodate other people, don't hurt anyone's feelings. And so that socialization of being raised and acculturated to being a hostess removes some of that natural aggression and that natural assertiveness, which is another interesting insight. How about the second one? It's impossible to talk about accomplishments without bragging.
It doesn't mean we all know how to do it.
Right, okay. And that's the point. It is absolutely possible to talk about accomplishments without bragging, and men do it all the time. Sometimes they sound like they're bragging, but they're actually speaking facts. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to talk about accomplishments in a factual way and then just back it up with some evidence. And it'll be when we get to the point about speaking in results and value speak. There's a right or wrong way to speak or present or communicate in general. Is there a right or a wrong way?
I don't like right, wrong.
That's a bad construct, true. So, communicating, speaking to one person, speaking to 100 people, speaking to 10 people, there is no right or wrong way. There never will be. There are some best practices, of course, but the two most important things are being your authentic self, really being yourself. You don't need to put on another personality and be someone else to be effective. And that's whether you're in an important conversation, in a client meeting, or in a formal presentation. Being authentic is critical. And then being present is the second thing. Actually connecting with your audience. Those are the two most important things. The rest is kind of, up to you, your judgment based on who you're talking to, who the audience is, what the situation is, whether it's, what's at stake. You will make judgment calls. But there's no right or wrong. And sometimes this is what blocks, especially executive women, in a meeting or a presentation, is they think they need to be a certain way. And you really just need to be yourself. How about this? Some people are just naturals at being effective communicators and being effective presenters and speakers.
True. I suspect that some people are gifted and, yourself you are, but
It's probably false, but it's hard. It's like, 'cause some people seem like they can communicate, like it just comes to them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's something that people can learn, but there are some people who don't seem to need as much explicit training.
Interesting. Okay. I think all of your observations are true. There are some people to whom it comes naturally and they naturally enjoy a dialogue, a conversation. They enjoy leading a meeting. They enjoy delivering a presentation. But overall, nobody's really a natural. Most people work at it. And how many of you have read the book Quiet by Susan Cain? It's fascinating. It's about introverts and extroverts. And when it dives into what happens in work environments and in the workplace, it's absolutely fascinating. It helped me a ton work with people. So there's this assumption that extroverts make great communicators. But they don't always, because sometimes they're just too much and they're all over their audience and they go on for too long and they just enjoy it so much and get so much energy from it that they're all over the place. It's not as focused and harnessed as it could be. And on the contrary, introverts make some of the best public speakers and some of the best contributors in meetings because they actually tend to be more thoughtful and more considered and more deliberate in what they say. The interesting thing about introverts who make great public speakers is they do it, they bring all their energy into the room, they give it all to the audience, and then they have to retreat to their cave for about 2 days to just like regroup and regenerate the energy. So it's fascinating, but the typical assumptions we have about who's a great communicator and who's a natural may not hold. Those stereotypes may not hold. Okay, discussion point number 3. It's so interesting that Wonder Woman just came out, the movie. That's not intentional. There are TED Talks about power poses and standing like Wonder Woman and all of that. So this is a little bit more in-depth discussion of body language because it does get that 55% weighting. It is on everyone's minds. You're aware, all of you are aware that it's actually an issue and it carries a lot of weight in a first impression. And then there's eye contact, and am I supposed to really, if I go into this meeting, should I sort of act more like a man? And, I've got good posture and I'm polite. What else is there to do? So I just want to cover a few really simple, hopefully easy to retain body language best practices. So one thing, and this is interesting because the videographer asked me, she said, well, you'll probably be delivering from the podium today. So I said, no, I won't be. I'll be on the floor. So how is this?
Static.
It's static and there's blockage between us.
Teach us to cook. I don't know.
Right, if there were a stovetop here, I don't know what I would teach you actually. I mean about cooking. Even though I love to cook, I don't know that I could. I never measure. I don't measure. That's my bad thing. I just don't have the patience to measure. So the first best practice is actually you can connect with your audience and be more authentic if you're closer to them or if you're leaning toward them as opposed to standing statically behind the podium. If you were in the keynote this morning, Shannon, who's actually a friend of mine, Shannon panicked for a second over the microphone because if she was stuck using the static microphone at the podium, she wasn't going to be able to move. And she likes to move not only because she has so much energy, but because she actually wants to connect. So as a best practice, that's something that's really important. Whenever you are in a meeting, in a presentation, you actually really want to throw some body language behind connecting with your audience. Hands, I get asked about, can I use my hands? Yes, it's okay to use your hands when you're talking. It's absolutely okay. Men do it all the time. If it's authentic to you, I wouldn't force it, but if it's authentic to you and you're a person who talks with your hands, absolutely. The only thing that's sort of cautionary about that is don't do it in front of your face where you're blocking yourself and or creating some kind of a distraction. Your voice is an important tool, and as you saw, the tone of voice weighed 38% in first impressions. Your voice is a tool. You get to raise it, lower it, you get to speed up your pace, slow it down, you get to take pauses. You can use your voice as a tool. And in general, moving is good. There are data on attention spans that suggests that audiences need something to happen every 8 seconds in order to hold on. It's craziness, I know. But when you think about what a sitcom, if you watch a sitcom, you will notice that the camera angle changes about every 8 seconds. And that is meant to hold on to your attention. And so moving around the room, you'll notice that Shannon, because she does this, she had a lot of physical antics, and she would shift from side to side in terms of where she was in relation to the podium. So moving around, quote unquote, leaning into your audience, using your hands, using your voice, and making eye contact are obviously all the best practices. Nothing about what I just mentioned is super fancy or impossible to do. You can all do it, because if you remember, the two most important things about communicating are being yourself and connecting with your audience. So at a certain point, you just say, you know what, I'm going to be present with these people, I'm going to connect and communicate with them. Okay, so now we get to the section of today where I'm hoping to give you actionable tools, things that may sit and reside in your gut. You kind of know them, but we're going to raise them to a level of awareness and talk about them in specifics, so that there may be a nugget or two in here that you'll actually use in your work lives. So the first one is elevator pitch, which is, fraught with all different kinds of meanings, and we'll talk about that. Presenting your work and ideas. This is another place where women get hamstrung and may not be as effective as they can be. And then finally, the ultimate, and these are just super, super practical communication scenarios that happen pretty much on a daily basis. The last one is asking questions and for help. And we'll talk about that more. So first, the elevator pitch. This has so many meanings. Tell me what you think it refers to.
Like a one-on-one motivational kind of, or informational speech, informal, but prepackaged, like there in your head, and you want it to be about, I don't know, a minute or two.
Interesting. Okay. This is great because I think there are so many different definitions.
I was taught that it's something you have in your pocket for
It's
when you're on the elevator
prepackaged.
with someone, right?
Uh-huh.
But it's concise enough that you can deliver a complete message in the time it takes the elevator to travel from one floor to the other. And yet, you can also add to it if it turns out that you're both riding up to the 10th floor and you have more time.
Right. Okay. So actually, a combination and any other definition that anybody else has, it's yes. Yes, Jenny, and yes, absolutely. So an elevator pitch is really the simplest way to define it is it's a personal introduction. And it could be about you and or about your business. What happens is you don't always know when to pull it out. So it is prepackaged. It is something you know. It's super concise and crisp and something you should be able to just rattle off. But the opening for it comes in a variety of different ways. Sometimes it comes in a question like this: tell me a little bit about yourself, which is one of those wide open things. And how do you typically answer that? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jen Gibbs. I'm an information designer who specializes in helping businesses tell their stories.
Okay.
It does tend to be educational. It's like a little bit of a CV, I think, at least in certain communities. And other things that didn't come in this one might be a more concise, no, that's not right, the definition of yourself in terms of your roles in society. I'm a mom, I'm the president,
Right. Okay. So hold those thoughts. Does anybody else want to offer their who are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Okay, we'll just go with you, Jen. Let me ask you this about Jen. Does anybody know what an informational designer is? Good information for you. Interesting. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. We're going to do a teeny tiny exercise. One of the things that Jen did when she told us a little bit about herself was she gave us data points, right? Her name, what she does, what the business does. And I remembered informational designer because I wasn't familiar with what that was. Did you guys remember anything else?
Helping businesses tell their story, I think, was interesting.
Okay, that's
Word
interesting.
story.
Piques the curiosity.
Yeah.
Do you know anything else about Jen? What she's passionate about, proud of, what she's accomplished? Not a ton. So what you're looking to do, and women resist this, it feels self-promotional, it feels a little bit like bragging. What you're looking to do when you create an elevator pitch or a personal introduction is to answer the question to yourself, who am I anyway? What am I proud of? What am I passionate about? What are some of my more outstanding traits? What are my goals and aspirations? Is there something that I value that is really central to who I am? So back to authenticity, we're really looking to create a personal introduction that has a hook or a grabber right away, right off the bat. You know, your name is important, but right after that, you're looking to throw something out there that captures who you are. So I have a friend whose resume doesn't necessarily look logical. She doesn't have 1,000 jobs on there, but she has a couple of really interesting positions, and they don't necessarily correlate with one another. But in each one, she got into that opportunity at an early stage in the organization. And so part of her personal introduction has become, I'm Janet, and I'm an explorer. I like to get into situations and organizations before they've actually defined themselves and help get ahead of the curve and get ahead of it in terms of defining the mission and setting goals and blah, blah, blah. So that's different than I'm Janet, this is my last position, this is the position I'm currently in, and all the data points. What happens when you create that larger, and you refer to this, Jen, message, you know, that one statement that captures who you are, that addresses really who you are more inside than just who you are in the workplace. What happens is you state that, and then you back it up with the data points, the detail, the background, as time allows and as your audience's appetite allows. So my personal introduction that I use is, I'm Beth Levine, and I save lives one conference room and one boardroom at a time. I save the lives of speakers and communicators by helping them shape and harness their messages, and I save the lives of their audience members who might otherwise die of boredom. My company is called Smart Mouth Communications. It was founded in 2005 in Salt Lake City. Now I'm going through the detail. I have these types of clients, blah, blah, blah. At this point, you're asleep. So that's another example. So one time I said, I don't actually save lives, and somebody in the audience said, oh yeah, you do, because we die of boredom every day in conference rooms and meetings and things like that. But it's like an attention getter, right? So if I'm in a large crowd and I have the latitude to be a little bit pithy, that's the introduction I'll use. You don't always have that opportunity. But when you do, you want to have it on hand. You want to know what that one statement is. So take a second. Do all of you have pens and paper? I think you do. Think about what that might be. and then a few bits of data after it, and create a little bit of a personal intro for yourself that you would use if a meeting leader said, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves, or somebody you really want to know or meet says, tell me a little bit about yourself. Then we'll ask someone who's brave to share. If you have more than 3 or 4 sentences, you might be going too far. In other words, it might not be something you can remember to deliver at another time. So be careful of that. So Jen, we're probably going to ask you to share for comparison purposes, but don't worry, you won't be the only one.
Oh, thank goodness.
You ready?
No, but in the spirit of everything, I will go anyway.
Well,
being one of those introverted people who likes to go back to my cave, chew on things for a while. So my first response when you had said, okay, so this, I'm like, okay, what would be really dramatic? And I'm like, I was thinking, okay, so I'm Jen Gibbs, I'm an award-winning writer, but then I'm like, that sounds to me like bragging. So like, I don't know, so I'm Jen Gibbs, I'm a writer and editor who helps people learn more through, and then I just trailed off. So through storytelling in the business, in the workplace.
So were any of you put off by award-winning writer?
Nope.
No.
I thought it was
I wanted to ask what it was.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, as long as you can back it up, which obviously you can, yeah, we trust that you can. Introverts don't exaggerate. So can you go back to that? I'm Jen Gibbs and I'm an award-winning writer.
I'm Jen Gibbs. I'm an award-winning writer, and I love bringing my storytelling abilities to other women to help them succeed in their business and personal goals.
Wow, definitely.
Thank you. Thanks for the workshop.
What's that?
Thank you for the workshop.
So that was much better than her first one, right? And if you're at a networking event, like you sort of are, or you really are, you might want to go up and talk to her now. Whereas before, you said you're an informational designer. And bear with me, because this is no offense, because most of us don't know what that is, wall goes up. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. She seems interesting. Not really sure what she does, so I wouldn't know what to talk to her about. Now, people know what to talk to you about. That's awesome. Yeah, and don't be afraid. Nobody here was offended by award-winning writer. I think that needs to be up front.
That's really good to know.
Yeah.
Because it feels weird to say.
It does. I know. That's that hostess thing. You don't want to, you don't want to hog the spotlight or, but get rid of it. Anybody else want to share? Jenny?
I'm Jenny Bell. I'm a bilingual family physician with broad, long experience from Charleston to San Jose to Salt Lake. I love to get to know the patient very well.
Wow. Okay. Jenny, you know what I want to hear? I'm a bilingual physician who loves to get to know her patients really well. I've worked in blah, blah. So the cities are actual data points, and I would put them below. But what differentiates you is this idea that you're bilingual as a physician, and B, you love to get to know your patients. So that means that when you come in the room, you've probably reviewed the chart. That's guess what? That's new, right? And you're going to talk to the patient. So those are two differentiators, and I would plop those right out in the beginning. But that's great. It's different than what might you have said before we had this conversation.
I'm Professor Emeritus at the University of Utah in the Family Practice Department. I have 142 publications, and I'm one of the leaders. That's
Okay.
a lot, but that's sort of resume.
But that's your verbal resume, and that's data point, data point, data point, data point, right? So this one is much more qualitative than quantitative, and it actually gives people, again, that entry ramp to go talk to you because there are points of curiosity there. Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Well, I can share.
Okay.
So I'm Wei. I'm senior country manager at on-site care. So I'm passionate about supporting the company's growth. And I'm also a mom and wife. I have 2 daughters. I'm also passionate about supporting my family's career and like my daughter's future.
Uh-huh. So actually that was great. What I would love to see you do is say, is your name Wei? I'm Wei, and I find that I love to support growth. At work, I do that by being an accounting manager at on-site care, and at home I do that with my children who are pursuing, whatever. So that common piece of supporting growth, I do that at work and I do that at home. Very engaging. Okay. So thanks you for participating and volunteering, or I voluntold you, but
It was for my good.
it was for your good, yeah. So that's just, hopefully in that section on the elevator pitch, it gave you a slightly different twist on how to pursue it and how to bring things forward. And also to be aware that nobody's going to ask you for your elevator pitch literally. They're going to say, hey, nice to meet you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Or there's probably going to be some very open-ended opportunity, and it's not going to have the words elevator pitch in it. So be aware and be prepared. The next big thing that happens to executive women, and all women actually, is presenting your work and ideas in meetings. So this cartoon is, well, I like to think of it as exaggerated, but I do think that occasionally it's not exaggerated. This actually happens where women feel a little bit at a disadvantage, or maybe dismissed a little bit, or maybe not as confident in putting their self and their work out there. So we've all read articles about diminishing language. I mean, there's even been a whole bunch written about eliminating the word just. Just a little this, or I just did that, in the sense of only. So there's a dialogue out there about that, but diminishing language comes in the form of apologies and qualifiers and disclaimers, and I'm going to get to meandering in a second, which is a usually uniquely female trait. But the apologies, qualifiers, and disclaimers, those sound like, I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're looking for, but here's this idea. Or, I'm sorry if I don't have this 100% right. We worked on it really hard. Hopefully, you'll like it. So those things are not necessary, but that's usually how we open, with an apology, a qualifier, a disclaimer, or we meander. We take a circuitous route to making our point. So in terms of presenting work and ideas, I have some replacements for the diminishing language. The first one is label it. So as a replacement for one of your opening statements that might diminish your credibility, your authority, your command of the meeting or the room, one of the first replacements is open by putting a label on the conversation or on the meeting. This meeting is meant to reassure you that the project is on track. We're going to cover this, time, budget, and scope. And hopefully by the end, you will be reassured. Or this meeting is for everyone's information purposes only, and by the end, I'm hoping that everyone will feel completely updated and informed on where we're going. Or it could be something like, let's say you're leading an all-hands meeting at your company and there's a new benefits package, and you know that everyone's really anxious about it because if there's any moving target in the world, it's healthcare and how it's going to get paid for, and people get really nervous around benefits time. So you bring them into the room and you start by labeling it. You can tell them this is a rollout of our benefits this year. I feel really good about it, and I want everybody in the room to listen carefully. Not a lot has changed, and when you leave the room, I hope that you feel good about it also. So actually, that forces you to think about the label. What kind of a meeting or a conversation is this? What is the outcome I'm hoping for? And then you take the answers to those questions that you've asked yourself and you turn them into sentences, and they become part of your opening. And they replace like I know you're all nervous about benefits, and I'm really sorry to have to do this. We really tried really hard, blah, 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 blah. Replace it. Be affirmative, positive, put a label on it. Let people know what's coming, and let them know what the desired outcome of the meeting is. Replacement number 2, serve dessert first. Okay, now we're going to go back to that concept of meandering. For some reason, women have a lot of capacity to listen to a long story and wait till the end for the conclusion, right? Like, Jenny, you could tell me about something that started in 1975 and ended in 2010, and I'd actually probably be really interested, because women, we like details, and we like to know history, and we like to understand fully. Here's where we can get into a distinct gender difference that we all know, either intuitively or at a higher level of awareness. Men want to know the bottom line. Give it to me in a nutshell. What's the bottom line? I just need the answer. And so when I talk about serving dessert first, I'm telling you that when you're presenting a body of material, and most meetings are in sections and presentations are in sections, I'm saying take the conclusion, whatever your conclusion would be, look for that and move it up front. Serve dessert first. Tell them the conclusion first. And a conclusion could be a summary statement. It could be something that summarizes the value or the significance or the importance of the section of material, and then serve it up. It holds their attention better. It sets context so that they understand all the detail and the evidence that you're backing it up with. And it's actually for the drifters, the people who go in and out during a meeting, you've given them what they need to know. They need to know the conclusions, so you serve it up front, you back it up with whatever evidence or information you need to support it, you close with it again, so you open and close with your yummy piece of cake, and then you can move on to the next section. So it's a way, and it's helpful to other women too. It's not just an exclusively a gender thing, but we tend to be good doobies as communicators, and so we communicate like we were taught to write an essay in school, which is you better prove it and then summarize. Prove it and then summarize. And I'm saying that's okay, but take that summary and put it up front also. Okay? And then the third replacement. So similar to tell me a little bit about yourself, there are those other open-ended questions. What are you working on these days? Or what do you do? What does your company do? Those are like wide open-ended. And again, we just sort of, because we don't have something prepackaged, we answer with the data points. I'm a title, I'm a job function, this is the name of the company, and this is what we do. So I'm asking you to think about adding the why, which is so easy. So I do communication coaching and training so that people and organizations are more effective in their work. Or I'm creating a suite of online courses which will hopefully result in my being able to scale my business and allow professionals to access training when they can get to it and in a self-paced way. So I didn't just tell you what I do, and I didn't just tell you what I'm working on. I told you what it should result in and the so that. This is probably one of the single biggest missed opportunities in how we communicate, is leaving off that value. So again, in the elevator scenario, you get in the elevator, you run into somebody you know who's either a potential client or customer or has been a client or customer, and they say, hey, what are you working on these days? You're probably, before you saw this slide, you're probably gonna run down a laundry list. And laundry lists don't stick. Data points don't stick. But if you add a so that or a which will result in, then people understand the value, the why of what you're working on. So don't forget that. So you actually, Wei, alluded to it. Being an accounting manager at On-Site Care, the work that you do is important so that the company can achieve its growth targets, right? Or achieve certain efficiencies or something like that. And so adding on just a simple clause makes a huge difference. Okay, and finally, the vulnerable spot. Asking questions and asking for help. This is something that becomes very tricky for women, and especially women at an executive level. First of all, women in general, we don't necessarily want to be that vulnerable in the workplace, and especially if we're at the top of our organizations, we're going to be super careful about how we do that because it feels sensitive with male colleagues or male customers or clients or vendors, whoever they may be. We all go through this little bit of a risk-reward balance in our heads, like, is it worth it? Can I be this vulnerable? Are they going to think I'm less competent? Or on the risk side, I might get it wrong. I mean, this customer has just, downloaded a bunch to me. I don't want to get it wrong. I need clarification, or I need to ask for help. In terms of questions, we're going to keep this super simple. No preamble. And the preamble would sound something like the diminishing language. Like, I'm sorry to have to ask this, or I feel kind of funny, but replace it with, I have a question. You're human, you are competent, you can just say, I have a question. It's okay. In fact, when I do speaker coaching and presentation training, what I find hamstrings people the most is the Q&A section. Because they're like, what if I don't know the answer? Like, well, you're human. You couldn't possibly know every answer. It is okay not to know something. It is okay not to understand something. Part of your work lives and your career journeys are about learning. So we're learning all the time on the job, and it's okay to say, I have a question. You can also use appreciative listening. So to that client or that customer who's just given you the big download, and you're actually not sure, you need some clarification, some direction, start by saying, okay, so I heard you say this, and this. Is that correct? Okay, so the piece that I think I'm missing is, and then ask for it. But start by repeating back what you've understood from what they've told you, so that then you have a launching off point to ask for the help or the clarification or the question. Or ask really assertively. I want to have complete understanding of what we're doing here, or I want to be 100% clear on this, so can I ask you a question? Or I'd like to ask you for some resources. So those are just highlighting a couple of super simple, every situation has its own nuancing, and every time you communicate, you're making a judgment call about how you're going to handle it. But these are some examples of how to just sweep away the diminishing preamble and launch right into it nicely. And finally, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about how to disagree with someone. I think this is especially important for women because I think we shy away from it. We tend to avoid conflict, and when we don't avoid it, we do dive into a disagreement, we're perceived as being overly aggressive and things like that. So I have this incredibly simple recipe for how to disagree with someone. It could be a colleague, could be a client or a customer, could be a vendor, it could be somebody you partner with in business, and you want to be able to disagree with them. They've just said something like wild-haired, you totally disagree. What do? Well, first of all, it's not up here, but you want to stay calm. You don't want to get heated. You don't want to raise your voice. That doesn't work for anybody, male or female. The first thing you want to do is say, surely we have a common goal, or surely we have some common objective, some common value that we both hold. You go there and you say, we both want this project to proceed on time and on budget. I get that. Then you ask, but can I offer you a differing viewpoint to what you just put on the table? The person is between a rock and a hard place when you do that. Who's going to say no to that? Just a jerk, right? So nobody's going to say no. So then the floor is yours, and you go. You remain calm, you keep your voice calm, and then you offer not the disagreement, but a differing viewpoint. And if you look at it as a differing viewpoint rather than as a disagreement, you'll probably deliver it more effectively. So In conclusion, I want to ask you, do you have some ahas? Are there some notes to self, things you'll do differently, things you'll take with you when you leave here? Yes? Good. Excellent. So I'm wide open to questions. Anything that you need clarification on that you're not sure 100%, ask away.
Do you have an app or virtual presence where you can be on my shoulder from my rotation? With the diminishing language, you hit, like, that's the nail on the head for one of my weakest points in my oral communication skills, is that sort of on the fly, you know.
Yeah, I can't be with you, but you can put it in your notes when you're going into a meeting and just remind yourself in red, no, line through it, circle and line through it.
Questions?
Yes, Jen?
When I've been taught about elevator speeches, it was always to advance the business's agenda, and it was never a personal statement.
So
it
there-
was really fun.
Yeah, so there are personal and business-oriented elevator pitches, both. And so actually that's a good point, because for those of you who have your own business, you should create one of those along the same lines, but for your business. And you can do it for different projects too. Create like little mini stump speeches for some special project you're working on. Topics that you know are going to come up over and over again. So. Okay, well, I'm around. I'm going to fiddle with the technology, because that whole process of putting down one set of slides and bringing up another should take about 15 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.